Hello world, and welcome to the channel. If you're new, I'm Joy, and here we are all about growing and glowing, so be sure to smash that subscribe button to join the fam. Before we get started, if you are a business owner or a beginner content creator and you want to learn more about content creation or social media marketing, then head over to bossclubacademy.com where you can learn tips on content creation, how to build websites, flyers, and much more. So let's get started. So today's video is about a surgeon who experimented on black women. So one of the most well-known surgeons in the 19th century was a slave owner / surgeon named James Marion Sims. He was regarded as the father of gynecology. He rose to fame when he invented the first treatment of vesicovaginal fistula, which is an anomalous communication between the bladder and the vagina, resulting in continuous leakage through the vagina. J. Marion Sims was born January 25, 1813 in Hanging Rock, Lancaster County, South Carolina. And y'all, I'm sorry, but if I'm looking down, it's because I have notes and I don't want to miss anything, so yeah. His father was Jack Sims and mother was Mahala Maki Sims. He was the oldest of 7 children, and he attended what is now the University of South Carolina. So after he graduated at the University of South Carolina, he opens his first practice, which fails after a year, after 2 babies that was under his treatment died. So after that, he moved to Macon County, Alabama, where he worked at slave plantations performing surgeries on slave women after they'd given birth. In December of 1836, he married Teresa Jones and had 9 children. After suffering malaria and intestinal disorders, he moved to Montgomery. By 1850, he was successful and owned 17 slaves. Sims was hailed as a surgical hero during his lifetime and admired by new surgeons after his death. However, his reputation began to suffer in the middle of the 20th century after vocal critics accused his treatments as being unethical. The main cause of these assaults on Sims was because he tried to treat vesicovaginal fistula on a group of black slave women in Montgomery, Alabama, who he had housed in a tiny hospital behind his house. He repeatedly operated on these women between the end of 1845 and the summer of 1849. One of those women was a young girl named Anarcha, and before Sims was able to seal the openings in her bladder and rectum, Anarcha underwent 30 procedures without anesthesia. The 3 women that he started his experiments on were Anarcha, Betsy, and Lucy, who all lived and worked on various plantations around Montgomery, Alabama. After giving birth, it is said that all 3 of these women experienced a medical ailment that rendered their bladders and bowels inoperable. This required for them to be separated from other workers, and they were told that they would have to live with the discomfort and the embarrassment of their wounds forever. All of their supposed owners were upset with their conditions, but not because they cared about them and wanted them to get better, but because they could not work to make money for them. Lucy was the first to get operated on. There were lots of other men in the operating room because they wanted to see the surgery. But Lucy was not questioned about her comfort level with unfamiliar men seeing her undressed and being in the room while she's getting a procedure done. And just so Sims was sure that Lucy's uncontrollable movements wouldn't interfere with his process, she was taken into the operating room completely naked and bound to a table so she could not move. And the procedure was done without any anesthesia to help numb the pain. After the surgery, Lucy developed a really bad infection from a device that Sims had placed into her bladder. She was in agonizing pain for days, and her infection was cured, but her injury did not heal. So this surgery was a fail. The next to get operated on was Betsy, and she was similarly naked on the surgery table just like Lucy was, and she was also not sedated. Sims operated on Betsy, this time using a gadget that he created, so she did not contract an infection like Lucy did. However, Lucy's condition was not fixed, and this was also a fail. The last operation for Anarcha had the same outcome. So after Anarcha's surgery was spread publicly, the neighborhood medical community concluded that Sims was a failure and they stopped funding his medical experiments. And without a cure, the slave owners deemed the women useless and decided to leave them in Sims' care. So for the next 5 years, Sims conducted experiments on these women. And he also brought in additional women to use as test subjects. And due to the lack of prenatal care for slave women, he never ran out of people to experiment on. In fact, Sims purchased one patient because her slave owner felt that he didn't want to lose money on his investment due to an experimental surgery. Sims used a total of 12 women to experiment his technique on, but only Betsy, Anarcha, and Lucy were named. In the summer of 1849, Sims performed his 30th procedure on Anarcha. He applied all of his new tools and methods that he learned over the years. In this time, Anarcha made a full recovery. Sims then moved north and closed his hospital. After 5 long years of absence and experiments, Lucy, Anarcha, and Betsy were all returned to their owners. Now remember, these women were all new mothers that were taken from their children and families to be experimented on for 5 years without any say-so. Sims would then go on to obtain money and fame and appeal to a wider audience. He never mentioned that he experimented on black slave women, who he had total control over their bodies. Many new authors have attacked Sims for these horrendous historical events, one being Dorand Ojanuga, who said that Sims' attempts to cure vesicovaginal fistula was a classic example of evils of slavery and the misuse of human subjects for medical research. Sims gained notoriety and fortune as a result of unethical experimentation of powerless black women. These women did not want surgical care and was forced to have it. Not only were they forced to have it, but they were operated on without anesthesia. But later, when Sims would develop his operation and moved to New York to found the Women's Hospital, he used anesthesia on white women. His reasoning for this was that black women could withstand the pain and white women couldn't. Many critics feel that it was unnecessary for the experimentation on black slaves because in the 19th century, Southern physicians experimented in an ethical manner on white women with their consent. There have been arguments between critics whether or not Sims got consent from these women to perform surgeries on them without anesthesia. Some say he always asked for permission before performing any kind of surgery on anyone. Others say these women had no say-so about the surgery or any other aspect in their life, which sounds more believable. Sims wrote this in the New York Times, Medical Gazette and Journal of Health in January 1855. For this purpose, therapeutic surgical experimentation, I was fortunate in having 3 young healthy colored girls given to me by their owners in Alabama. I agreed to perform no operation without the full consent of the patients and never to perform any treatment that would, in my judgment, jeopardize life or produce greater mischief on the injured organs. The owners agreed to let me keep them all at my own expense till I was thoroughly convinced whether the affection could be cured or not. Sims supporters would also go on to say that just because the slaves were considered property doesn't mean that they did not give their own consent. They then go on to say that they were so willing to participate that Sims even trained them to be his assistants to work on one another in turn. Sims also wrote that there was a time that he had stopped attempting surgery on the women and they clamored for the operation, insisting that he keep trying to find a cure. In 1861, Sims moved to Europe because he felt uncomfortable being a Southerner in New York during the Civil War. While he was away, he gained an elite referral and began working on royals. He was also appointed chief surgeon in Paris in 1870 for treating casualties in the Franco-Persian War. He was made president of the American Medical Association in 1875. He became a founding member of the American Gynecological Society in 1877 and was made president of that society in 1880. He died in New York on November 30th, 1883 from coronary artery disease. I hope I said that right. So up until the 1970s, historical narratives were highly favorable to Sims. Now we know the odds of a slave owner / surgeon asking slaves who had no say-so in their life whatsoever if he could perform experimental surgeries on them with no anesthesia on his plantation, away from their families, and babies where they will be forced to stay for 5 years and they just agreed happily. Please. I think it's interesting to hear about these kind of events, and the fact that you have to kind of dig for these small, mind-boggling, factual details just makes you wonder. If they were doing that back then, what are they doing now? And when you think about it, it wasn't really that long ago. My great-great-grandmother was born in 1901. So her mother was pretty much alive, at the end of Sim's career or whatever. Which means that my great-great-grandmother's grandmother was alive when all this was happening. But let me know what you think about this story. Have you heard about it or others similar to it? But that's it for this video. Do me a favor and subscribe, like, and share this video because we are on the road to 1K. Thank you so much, and I appreciate you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.